Welcome to the world away.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
Welcome back to the world awaits. How are you, everyone? We thought this week we would introduce ourselves to those of you who might be new to listen, given we've actually now been going for 3 years. Can you believe it, Belle?
No, well, kind of. I can. 3 years is a long time. We've got 156 episodes for you to scroll back and listen to. So plenty of good stories back there. And so just a background on me. I mean, I started as a journalist, as a news journalist in Ireland. I mean, I've been working as a book production editor on a magazine in London. I trained as a journalist here in Canberra. And then I had a weird stint as a finance journalist, which was, if anybody knows how late I can file a tax return, that may actually come as a surprise to you. And then I came back to Australia. I was working on interiors and design glossies, but all the time I was writing travel. So all the places that I wanted to be, that I was visiting in between, I would be selling stories on the side. And then when I went full time into travel journalism, God, nearly 2 decades ago. That's kind of frightening. So yeah, I mean, even when I was a columnist at the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age, I was never in an office because strip lighting, it's like, it's so bad. And I've contributed to 6 books and guidebooks and written my own in including that weird one in lockdown as well. So that's a bit about what has got us to this point. Well, what got me to this point? What about you, Kirsty?
So also, just like you, Belle, I started out as a trained journalist in New Zealand and then worked in newspapers initially, and then I worked in radio, which was fascinating because I got to cover some incredible cases from court and did a lot of live reporting from court and some crime writing back then. So that might, have an indication of why I'm now a crime writer. But yeah, and then I switched to the dark side and went into PR for quite a while, and I worked for Tourism New Zealand, which was my first sort of experience into the travel industry. And gosh, I just got the bug from there. Loved travel from there. I also started doing travel writing when I was working for Tourism New Zealand, with the blessing of my then boss, for Jetstar magazine, actually, in New Zealand. A friend of mine was editing it. And so I started doing travel writing back then. And then, fast forward, we actually were fortunate enough to move to Australia. And because I worked in PR for quite a long time as well. When the kids were smaller, it was actually quite good financially and with stability to have that sort of income. So I worked in PR for quite a while. I ran my own PR agency for about 8 years. And then I wanted to go back into journalism. So I went full circle because I just loved and missed the writing, and the travel thing again was really a strong pull for me. So I started back in magazines here in Australia. I actually worked for a executive PR magazine, and then I got a gig working for travel publications. I was lucky to land the job as the first editor of Luxury Escapes magazine when it launched by Green Creatives. And I've since edited 7 magazines, and now I am a luxury editor for Carry On. And and also doing some travel writing, and I just love working in the luxury travel space. And Carry On's just an incredible brand. So, but we're going to now do a little fun fact. So, Belle, what's a fun fact about you?
Well, I once threw a coin to decide where I was going to live, and the flip side of the coin was Cairo. So Cairo won the toss. I moved to Egypt and I learned Arabic, and so that became the focus of my writing in the Middle East and Central Asia or North Africa, those sorts of countries with an Islamic bent to them. And because I just think they're so misunderstood. And so there you go. That's me fun fact, Kirsty.
That's how we sort of came to know each other, because Belle became the go-to for anything Middle East. And I'm editing magazines and looking for, editors are looking for writers who have an expertise and a specialization in an area. And you are absolutely known as the go-to for Middle East. So we've obviously traveled together too on familiars. But my little fun fact would be, as I said, I had sort of mentioned briefly earlier, but I'm writing luxury by day and writing crime by night. So I have my first book, a psychological suspense called White Lies, coming out next year. So yeah, that's my little fun fact. I was actually fortunate to get a 2-book deal with UK publisher Bloodhound Books through my amazing agent. And so yeah, my first book comes out next year.
Oh my goodness. So that is all about us. Some may be more that you need to know, like my tax return. Others, Kirsty, setting crime prime and luxury hotels. I think that would be the perfect day on your night job.
That is the theme of my very first manuscript is actually a travel editor who gets kidnapped. So there you go.
I like to think that you've modeled it on me as she lay in her Italian, 1,000 count linen sheet, splattered with blood. I'm seeing it all going on now. Now we're going to kick into the serious stuff on it. But it's not actually that serious. But, it's going to get your blood boiling as well because, any more mentions of blood, it's just going to keep sticking along. These are pet peeves in the travel space. So, okay, so kicking off, comparison site iSelect has revealed the in-flight habit that Aussies hate more than noisy children. What is it, Kirsty?
This one won't surprise anyone, but more than 4 in 10 Aussie travellers say having their seat kicked from behind is their number one plane etiquette bugbear. Oh my God. And that's followed by people who make phone calls, play videos or music without headphones. I have to say, kids kicking from behind. And also, not just kicking, how they push really hard on the... When you're on an international flight and there is actually in-flight entertainment and they push really hard on the back of your seat on their... Instead of just sitting back and watching one show and they're sort of basically hitting you in the head every time. Can't stand that.
Yeah, but also sometimes some people sleep with their heads up against the seats in front. So if you've got like someone sleeping heavily on it, then sometimes that's going to push you forward as well. And I think that is it doesn't enrage me as much as some of the others that we're going to come to, because the third bugbear for travelers is people who rest their feet on the window or the armrest. Like, have you someone beside you?
Disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, the other bugbear is that people that remove their socks and shoes on flights. And I'm okay with this if everybody's come on with clean socks and shoes. If you've just come to the airport, you've put some shoes on or something like that. But the thing that drives people wild, particularly, is parents who let their children watch videos without the headphones on. My goodness, especially if it's Baby Shark. And I've had this on a flight. Parents put their noise-cancelling headphones on. They put their noise-cancelling headphones on, leave their kid holding the iPad. Baby Shark. I heard it. Maybe it would have been 15 times before we were just sitting on the tarmac. Baby Shark.
You don't. Yeah, we do not need. Problem is the kids
At the other end.
The problem also is not even just what it is. It's the fact that these kids play their devices so freaking loud. It's like, why do you have to have it so loud? You don't have headphones and then you've got your audio on super loud. Right. Well, one of the others is we have people who stand up the second the plane lands. I don't really mind that. I don't mind people standing up as soon as the plane lands, as long as they help other people around them, like with the overhead luggage, and they don't sort of block the aisle. It's really annoying when someone gets up, they stand up straight away, they get their bag, leave everyone else's bags there, and then they push their way to ahead. I mean, that's infuriating. That just does my head in. Also, people who use speakerphone in airports, well, this is similar to what we were saying before, but I mean, who wants to hear someone else's conversation? I don't want to hear your full conversation about, what your kids had for dinner. Who needs to hear that? Just what's wrong with headphones, people? I mean, and if you can't put headphones on, then hold the phone to your ear because it's just not working for anyone. And the other one is travelers who stop suddenly in busy walkways and change directions. I don't really have a problem with that. I mean, sometimes people get distracted and can't find their way. It's not really a big deal.
Yeah, I know it is something that I think that probably drives Parisians wild, because you'll see, travelers in Paris, they'll just pull up while they're trying to work out where they are. And that's a city that needs to keep moving quickly. So I have seen that as a bit of a drama. But look, I've got to say, people that do that thing as soon as you land and they stand straight up and start getting their bag, that actually wrecks my head. That is got to be one of my top 2 things, because they don't help. Kirsty, they don't help people around them. It is very rare. And then they're getting all of their luggage and then they ram up. It's like if you're sitting up the front and you are not onto it, you're blocked in until somebody will be kind enough to let you cut into the loop. But you can't even get your luggage out. And then, of course, you land on the tarmac and then you're sitting there for another 10 minutes while you're still moving and taxiing, and then the stairs haven't come for the back section. All the time, you've got someone's face level with you. And I think that's disgusting, and people should be embarrassed, especially if you've been sitting down for the last 14 hours eating airplane food. I don't want to see it. I don't want to smell it. I think it's gross and it wrecks my head. Don't do it, people. Don't do it. Oh my God.
Oh,
There you go.
glad you got that off your chest.
Full vanity on that one. Great. All right. The last one is pets being allowed in the cabin. I'm okay with that. Bring on it.
Oh, bring on the dogs. Gosh, do you know, right? I always said I would rather have someone stay in my house with an animal than a child because a child will destroy things. An animal doesn't. Really, what are they going to destroy? I mean, yeah, bring on the pet. If you'd like to help support our production costs, you can buy us a coffee at coffee.com/theworldawaits. That's ko-fi.com/theworldawaits so we can continue to bring you inspirational travel interviews with the world's best.
This week, we are going to Argentina. Sexy, sultry, home of the tango, huge stakes and runners up in the world. So anyway, we needed to go to Argentina. I needed to call Rebecca Arnold, who is a Melbourne-based travel writer and serial expat. She's lived not only in Argentina, but also in Papua New Guinea and the US. And she is just back from a recent research trip updating for her travel planner service, Rebecca and the World. So let's go to Argentina. Hi, Beck. Welcome to The World Awaits. It's so great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Belle. I'm a long-time listener, so it's great to be here talking about my favorite country, Argentina.
Argentina, oh my gosh, we are all, it's just been on top of mind for everybody, hasn't it, with the World Cup? It's one of those countries that kind of, you think, it's so far from Australia, you think, I've really got to go, and you keep putting it in that bucket list. But tell us, so let's set the scene. How did you fall in love with Argentina?
Always had an affinity, I would say, for Central and South America. So in 2015, I was lucky enough to live in Buenos Aires for 2 years and took that time to travel around all of the country, north to south, all around South America as well. Spend time in Buenos Aires, which is an incredible city. And I just think Argentina is a country that's so easy to fall in love with. It's incredibly underrated. It's the 8th largest country and there is so much to do there. You've got amazing food, amazing wine, the scenery, there's hiking, there's mountains, there's amazing waterfalls that are 7 new wonders of nature. There's skiing, there's wildlife. There's not a lot that you can't do in Argentina.
Of course, I did not know it's the 8th largest country in the world. That's incredible. Because we're going to do some of the nuts and bolts stuff about getting around as well. But let's go straight into the heart of it. Let's go to Buenos Aires or BA. What's the vibe? Is tango a cliche? Should I go to see the Boca Juniors play? Or, tell me, how is it the beating heart of Argentina?
I think Buenos Aires is one of the best cities in the world. And it's sort of like Melbourne in that you don't go there for one attraction. There's no Colosseum, there's no Eiffel Tower, but there's a real vibe about the city. You want to spend time just wandering, eating, exploring, checking out the different neighborhoods. They're all very, very different to each other. So it's sort of like Melbourne in that regard. There's beautiful architecture. Argentina used to be one of the most richest countries in the world in the 20th century up until about the 1930s. So you've got all of this incredible architecture, the investment from the British back then. They used to call it the Paris of South America. And you can certainly see that when you walk down these amazing wide boulevards and visit buildings like Palacio Barolo, which is designed based on a Dante poem. So it's really incredible. You can see a tango show, absolutely, if you're interested in that. It's not cliche at all. Buenos Aires is the birthplace of tango. It started in La Boca, the port town, with the immigrants coming in. It used to be like men dancing with each other while they waited for the very few women to join them. So there's a lot of history there. You can go to amazing shows at nighttime with dinners, but you can also just see dances sometimes in the streets, like in the city, the barrio of San Telmo, which is one of the most famous neighborhoods to visit in the city, or even on the Puente de Mujeres, which is the bridge in Puerto Madero. There's always tango dancers around. And I would also definitely recommend going to a football game and see the passion for yourself. If you are following the World Cup, which Argentina got so close to winning again, you will see it in a game. The fans are absolutely incredible. They know the songs off by heart. There's chants, there's clapping. It's absolutely incredible to experience. And if you can see Boca Juniors and River Plate at a game, that is the most intense rivalry in the city. I would recommend going with a guide to a game. It can be not dicey, but you want to just know how to get in and out, how to get around, where to sit, what to do. So I would definitely recommend that in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, fascinating. Because of course this is Maradona's home place. This is his heartland. And I think that's a really good suggestion about taking a guide because, I haven't been back to Buenos Aires for a really long time, but it did have that, am I in the right place? Should I be walking through this area? Because as you say, it started off as it was a port town and it wasn't wealthy. And and you still have those different classes in Buenos Aires as well, don't you? You have those gorgeous, as you say, the big boulevards, some of the biggest in the world, and that really grandiose architecture. And then you've also got, very apparent poverty, which is really fascinating. And, I guess a hallmark of Buenos Aires. So I have actually I did a tango. I went to a tango academy. That was kind of a little bit mind blowing. But aside from the tango and from Boca Juniors, what else would you say that I absolutely had to do in Buenos Aires?
In Buenos Aires, you have to visit, as I said, no, actually go to explore all of the different neighborhoods and see how different they are. So there's Palermo, which is where I would recommend people stay, particularly if it's your first time in Buenos Aires. That's where all the restaurants are, the bars are, the shopping. That's where people live as well. So it's not a touristy area, even though you've got all of the tourist infrastructure there. I would definitely start in the Centro Histórico, which is where you have the Casa Rosada, which is the pink house, which is where the president's office is. You used to be able to do tours there, and unfortunately they don't offer them anymore, but you can see the building from outside, and it's quite incredible. In that area is also the Metropolitan Cathedral. That's where the former Pope used to work out of, and it's also got the remains of General San Martin in there. So it's quite a historic area. And then there's just again, the buildings there are just absolutely beautiful. Then you've got the area of Recoleta, which is where I used to live. And this is a very fancy area. You've got the embassies, these beautiful Baroque buildings, again, wider streets with just grand architecture and a little bit upper class when it comes to shops. Again, good restaurants, but I would say in Palermo, and if you want to hit up the restaurants. And then there's San Telmo, which is cobblestoned area. On Sundays, there's a huge market that takes over most of the streets, and you can buy, anything from souvenirs, Boca Juniors, jerseys, Argentina jerseys, to craft, to checking out the local food scene as well. But if you go during the week, it's much quieter, and the streets are actually lined with antique stores. So you can go in and see all of these beautiful antiques. It's another historic area. It used to be very wealthy. And then when the yellow fever came through, all of those people were pushed out of that area and moved to areas like Recoleta, and it became quite a poor area. So there's a style of building there called Peaches, which are these long, skinny buildings, and dozens of families used to live in these small spaces. So it's quite historic and just interesting to walk around, and very different with the cobblestone streets. And then you have the famous La Boca, which is where you would have seen those colorful buildings from Caminito. It's another interesting area to go to. I would recommend doing a tour through a company called Guru Walk, which has a fantastic free walking tour that doesn't just focus on the colorful streets. They actually talk about the history of this part of Buenos Aires because it's very historic. It's got a very strong immigrant background. This part was built on immigrants, and it's now been slowly gentrified. But this is home to Boca Juniors. It's home to La Bombonera, which is the big stadium. So that's who Diego Maradona used to play for. So it's quite interesting to just wander around there and hear about some of the history of this historic area.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Do love a good antique market. Like, I think the antiques in BA, sensational. And doesn't San Telmo has an antique section to it on the weekends, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can still go into the antique stores, and people will bring out into the streets their wares. But any day of the week it's interesting to visit. But the Sunday market is just a completely different vibe. It's quite fun to visit.
Fantastic. Obviously, most people arrive in BA, and then if they're flying in and they move, if they're not doing crossing land borders. But where else would you insist then they go? Like, what would be your perfect itinerary, and how much time do you actually need in the 8th largest country in the world?
I think you need at least 2 weeks. So a lot of people come to Argentina and they try to do everything, but being the 8th largest country, it is a lot of ground to cover and you can't see it all. So I would recommend choosing Buenos Aires, of course, and then picking somewhere in the south or somewhere in the north. The south, obviously, Patagonia. So you've got the very large area of Patagonia, which covers most of the southern part of Argentina. You've got the north of Patagonia, which is places like Bariloche, which is home to beautiful forests and lakes, and you can drive or bike what's called the Ruta de los Siete Lagos, which is the route of 7 lakes. There's actually a lot more than 7 lakes, but they've stuck with 7 for the name. So you can hire a car and just spend the day, spend 2 days just driving between there and San Martin de los Andes, which is the next little town along. And then further down, you've got Perito Moreno Glacier, and you can actually walk on this. So you can either just view it from the the boardwalks and spend a day checking it out. Or you can get on the glacier and actually walk across it with a guide. It's only allowed by guides. That's a fascinating thing to do. It is hard work. Your legs, you will feel it after several hours of walking in crampons on the ice. And then nearby is Argent, which is home to Mount Fitzroy. And there's just amazing day hikes that you can do from there. And then obviously you can go further south and there's Ushuaia, which is where a lot of people jump off for boat trips to Antarctica. There's Tierra del Fuego National Park. So that's an incredible part of Argentina, all of Patagonia. Again, you could spend 2 weeks just in Patagonia. And then you've got Mendoza, which is the famous wine region. And you could spend several days just visiting the 3 different wine regions of Mendoza. But there's also amazing hiking. It's home to the highest mountain in the Americas. There's horse riding. There's a beautiful road trip you can do up all the way up to the Chilean border, which is incredible scenery. But what I actually think is my favorite part of the country is the north of the country. So you're going up closer to the Bolivian border. You'll fly into a town or city called Salta, and it's in the desert. And there's just these incredible dramatic landscapes. So you've got this rich red earth, like, somewhere in Utah, these mountains that just have layers and layers of colors, yellow, green, red, brown layers of rocks, parts that look like the moon. And then there's also these amazing wineries. So that's the other wine region of Argentina. I would recommend spending 7 to 10 days doing a road trip up there and you'll be completely blown away. So I just think that just shows the diversity of Argentina. And then, of course, there's Iguazu Falls, which is, 3 kilometers worth of waterfalls that cross both the Argentinian, Brazilian and the Paraguayan border. So there's a lot to do, but I would pick just 1 or 2 of those and really focus your itinerary for a couple of weeks.
You've mentioned road trips quite a few times, so I think we might get into a bit of the nuts and bolts of the whole thing. How getting around Argentina, do you recommend, is it massive distances? So it sounds like what you're suggesting is you fly into one area, pick up a car and then do your road trips that way. How easy is it to drive around, if you're just an Australian driver, to translate that to Argentinian roads?
Pretty straightforward. A lot of the roads are very well kept. There's a few areas, particularly up in the north, where you're going to hit some dirt roads and you want to be sort of careful, but most of it is highways, particularly around the main areas of Mendoza, Patagonia, and up in the north. So the easiest way to get around is by air, of course, in such a large country. So the national airline is Aerolíneas, and they fly to the major cities in Argentina. What's unfortunate about flying in Argentina is that to get from place A to B, often you have to fly back through Buenos Aires, which just adds a lot of extra travel time, which is such a shame. But again, which is why I recommend really focusing on particular areas in the country so you're not going back and forth. But hiring a car is very easy. You can jump online. They've got all the major car brands that you would know from here in Australia or anywhere overseas. It's pretty affordable. You're probably looking at, $50, $60 a day, depending on where you're going. So probably Australian prices for renting a car, and fuel is about the same price as here, maybe a little bit cheaper. So it's pretty easy to get around. There's a few things you need to keep in mind. You have to keep your headlights on even during the daytime. Police will pull you over. I have had that happen to me. So just a few little quirks, but we've had no issue other than, of course, you're driving on the other side of the road and you've got to get used to that. I would not recommend driving in Buenos Aires, but anywhere outside, absolutely. A road trip in Argentina is always a good idea.
Fantastic. And then what about, I was going to ask you about which side of the road they drive on. Yeah, it does require some adjustment, but what about getting in and out of the country as well? Because does LATAM still have a flight pass? And can you use that in Argentina?
Don't know that they did. I did a bit of research. They don't seem to have that flight pass anymore. So you'd probably want to book your flight in Argentina and in South America separately. LATAM used to fly in Argentina quite frequently. So they were the competitor Aerolíneas, but after COVID, they don't fly. They fly into the country, but they don't fly domestically within Argentina. So you probably do have to look at that. But you can fly from Sydney and Melbourne to Santiago and then to Buenos Aires with Qantas and LATAM, or you can fly via Auckland, and then there's a direct flight from Auckland with Air New Zealand to Buenos Aires. So there's a couple of different options there. Similarly, from Brisbane, you could fly to Auckland and then fly to Buenos Aires. But once you're in Argentina, Aerolíneas is the airline I would choose. There's a couple of other low-cost airlines, but they don't have the best reputation for on-time performance. So I would always choose Aerolíneas. They might be a little bit more expensive, but your not going to have major delays or cancellations like the other airlines seem to have.
That is a very good point. So do Australians need a visa to enter Argentina?
No, as we are currently recording this, always check. You don't need a visa to enter Argentina, but you do need medical insurance. So you have to have proof of medical insurance to enter the country. Have I ever been asked for this? No, but it is a requirement from the government to have some sort of medical coverage while you're in the country.
Okay. All right. That's quite a random one. And what's the best time to go there?
A lot of people travel in the summer months. They obviously have the same summer months as us, but it's quite hot. Some areas, particularly in the north of the country, are going to be rainy. So I would actually recommend spring and autumn. Autumn is great if you want to go to Mendoza. That's in March is the Vendimia, which is the harvest season. So there's a lot of festivals. All of the vineyards are lush and green. And it's just a really nice time in terms of the weather. Or I'd go in spring around October, November. November in particular, you get the jacarandas in Buenos Aires. So the streets are just full of the purple flowers. It's beautiful. But it also means that you could combine a bit of Patagonia. You know, parts of Patagonia will be opening again for summer. And you can also do the north because you'll be there just before the rainy season hits. So spring, autumn, I think are the best. But summer, you're obviously going to have a bit of hotter weather. Christmas time and January, not great. I think a lot of people go thinking there's going to be parties going on. It's going to be a great atmosphere. But a lot of people in particular clear out of Buenos Aires and they go to their, down to the beach or to family homes in the country. So it doesn't have as good a vibe in those months as I think other months do.
Also, you've got that issue that December, January is peak Antarctic season. So what we've seen anyway is that a lot of people are flying over to go to Antarctica. So it really pushes, flights are already expensive at that time of year, but you've got that added pressure of it being, the time that everyone's getting down to Antarctica, and it can push up the prices is what I've seen historically for that as well. Speaking of prices, is it a pricey destination? It goes through peaks and troughs, doesn't it? I think the first time I went, it was like bargain basement kind of place, and it was quite surprising. What's it like now? Because you've just returned from there, haven't you?
I have. So Argentina used to be, a little bit more expensive than other South American countries. Now I would say it's a lot more expensive than other South American countries. You can still eat out and have an amazing meal for much cheaper than what you'd pay here or in Europe or New York City or other major cities around the world. But it's not what I would consider a bargain destination. There are certainly ways you can cut down on costs, as we've just talked about, traveling in shoulder season, getting an apartment so you can cook a few meals yourself. But I would definitely do a bit of research and plan out a budget before you go so that you're not shocked.
Yeah. And you did mention eating. So let's talk a little bit about food. What is the essential eat? And do you have to readjust your time zone on your stomach? Because I have vivid memories of eating steak at 11 o'clock at night and just being surrounded in packed restaurants and thinking, how do these people remain so fabulously trim when this is their time? They're in a different, in a very different time zone to a lot of people here. And you're an early morning person. I'm a late night person. And even I was going, whoa, you guys, next level.
I think we were absolutely shocked when we moved there. We'd go out, we would be like, let's try and do late dinners, and we'd be out at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. and we'd be struggling, and there would be toddlers out just, acting like this is completely normal, which of course it is normal. So yes, there is definitely a late night culture in Argentina, in Buenos Aires particular. You'll be eating it, if you wanted to eat like the locals, you'll be eating at 9, 10, 11 p.m. at night. If you wanted to go out to nightclubs, which I do not do, you'd be going out at 2 a.m. It's a very, very different culture. But the good thing is if you want to go out and eat at gringo hours, the restaurants are open and you're going to have more chance of getting a table. Some restaurants even do sort of discounts before, 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. So that can be another way to grab a bargain while still eating at a normal hour. In terms of what to eat, of course, there's steak. We cannot go to Argentina without eating steak. They are the biggest consumers of steak, I believe, in the world, or beef in the world. The asado culture is really, really strong. So asado is the Argentinian version of barbecue. It's also the event around barbecue. So you invite your friends and your family over on Sunday for an asado. As a tourist, you're probably unlikely to get invited to those, but there are some great experiences in Buenos Aires that will help you feel like you're part of it. There's one called Asado Adventure, where you go to Frank's house, and his beautiful house in Palermo, or Betty and Marcelo, who are this gorgeous Argentinian couple who will cook this incredible asado for you and 10, 15 other people. So it's a really lovely experience. that gives you a bit of a taste of what that culture is like in Argentina. And then there's other things that you have to try. Empanadas, of course. Everyone would have heard of empanadas. Yeah, you Japan. You just like this sausage, chorizo, but it's not spicy. Argentinians do not eat spicy food. In bread with chimichurri sauce or salsa criolla. So really delicious little snacks. And then the Italian influence is very strong in Argentina. So you've got incredible ice cream. I feel like there's an ice cream store on every single block in Buenos Aires. And that you are not going to be able to say no to that. And then the pastries are incredible. They have media lunas, which are like mini croissants. I have never visited the dentist so much than I did when I lived in Buenos Aires. They love their sweet treats. But as you say, they're usually very trim people. They really look after themselves, but they just really enjoy eating and sharing food with friends and family. And there's a tradition, it's not just in Argentina, but it's called the sobremesa, which means basically above the table. So at the end of a meal, you don't just grab your bill and leave. You sit there and you talk and you share a coffee with whoever you've been eating dinner with. It's a really beautiful culture in that regard. You don't just eat and run. You actually sit down and enjoy the food and you enjoy the time with the people that you're with.
I need to go back. And as you say, the ice cream is actually next level for that whole thing. Maybe they just eat all of those little snacks because you've got to keep yourself going. Like, if you're not eating until 10 or 11 o'clock at night, you've got to have that little, like in Spain, a little 7 to 8 o'clock snackerini kind of thing. Sorry, so we didn't Spain. I love it. I mean, isn't that the beauty of travel? Oh my goodness. So Beck, I think that was a really interesting point you made about Melbourne and Buenos Aires. You kind of you don't go there because, like Cairo's got the pyramids or, London's got Big Ben. It doesn't have that one draw card. It's more of those places that it's a vibe, right? But like Melbourne, Buenos Aires, sorry, has an amazing cafe scene, doesn't it?
They do. They love their coffee. And from our most recent trip, I just feel like there's cafes popping up on every corner, more than when we lived there. There's also something called a bar notable, which is these bars that are either historic in terms of how long they've been around for, or the people that used to visit them, so writers and thinkers. And you can visit a lot of them around the city, and a lot of them are really beautiful. So there's Confiteria La Ideal, and I believe they filmed part of Evita there, and it's stunning. Chandeliers, you've got LED light windows and LED light scenery in the ceiling, sorry. Or historic buildings like Cafe Tortoni, which is very touristy, but go in there, grab a coffee, grab a media luna, and just sit and people watch. They're incredible places to visit.
I'm going to ask a little second question on this one. Do the locals go to those places? Because I have seen on social media that that they've had an absolute resurgence, kind of like the cafes in Vienna, where they actually you have a timed visit, or is it just a bit more relaxed than that? I mean, I'm talking Austrian timekeeping here, as opposed to South American timekeeping.
Time in South America, very different. They're generally pretty flexible. Cafe Tortoni, if you go there around 9 or 10 a.m., there's going to be a queue, so prepare for that. But there are so many other bars and cafes, the bar Notables, which is not a bar with serving alcohol, although they can do that. But for a coffee, you can just wander in at most times of the day and get a drink and a little snack.
No, that sounds perfect. I feel the need to just be going and eating everything Argentinian right now. But our final question, which is a question we ask all of our guests, and I know that you, as a long-term listener, have probably got yours already prepped. So tell us, what is your most bizarre travel experience?
There's probably a lot I could talk about, but it has to be related to Argentina. And it's when we lived in Argentina, money was completely different. You used to have to pay everything in cash. You couldn't pay anything with credit card. It's very, very different now. You can do that. But what I would do to get cash is I would call up my guy, take some US dollars, go meet him in his car. We would drive around the block a couple of times, either from our home or from work. And then he dropped me back off with this huge paper bag of pesos, like stacks of pesos. And it honestly felt like we were doing a drug deal. And I was just trying to get cash just to live and pay for things. So it was very bizarre. Thankfully for travelers, it's not like that anymore. But it was certainly one of the most bizarre ways I've ever had to get money.
I love it. Did you feel safe when you were doing it?
Absolutely. He came with a recommendation, but I think there was only one time I had to walk home from work and I was holding on to my bag very, very tightly.
Oh, amazing, amazing. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Thanks for talking about Argentina with us and reminding us what a great country it is and why we need to be checking in straight away. And your website has some incredible recommendations about, you'll get down at granular level as to the best cafes, the best restaurants, which you've just run through again and refreshed on your latest fact-finding mission, haven't you?
Absolutely. Yes. I've got itinerary ideas. So if you want to go there for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I've got lots of ideas there and all of the things that you must eat while you're there, as well as helpful money tips and just things that you should know before visiting Argentina. But it is absolutely a country I think everybody should visit. I think it will blow a lot of people away in terms of what there is on offer there, what you can do, what you can see and eat. And the people are just beautiful and very welcoming and friendly. So I hope a lot of your listeners are now thinking about booking a flight.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Thanks, Bill.
And if this interview has you scanning for flights to Argentina, Rebecca is offering listeners a 30% discount on her hour-long travel consultations. Book via her website and add the discount code The World Awaits.
That was Rebecca Arnold talking about traveling in Argentina. And for more, you can sign up to her newsletter on her travel planning site, RebeccaandTheWorld.com. Our tip this week is to advise you of the reciprocal health agreements we have around the world if you have a medical emergency when you travel. And these are countries that provide some emergency care to Australians in public hospitals. It's just public hospitals. So it's to subsidise some emergency medical costs, but they don't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean you can go to a hospital and it'll be fully covered.
So Australia has reciprocal health agreements with 11 countries, 10 of which are in Europe. And they are Belgium, Finland, Italy, Malta, Netherlands, Norway, Ireland, Slovenia, the UK, and Sweden, which I'm very happy to see on the list because I'm going to Sweden this Christmas. And the 11th country, unsurprisingly, is New Zealand.
Yeah. And it's important to remember, though, that you should also still have travel insurance because if you travel to a country without an agreement, like the US, you're not covered. So, I mean, it's like, we've talked about cases before of hundreds of thousands of dollars, like bankrupting people because they've had to get evacuated, out of those countries. And so it's just always worth having travel insurance, obviously.
Yeah, look, interestingly, in our interview today, my guest, Rebecca Arnold, said that it's actually a legal requirement to have medical insurance when you go to Argentina, which I did not know. She said she's never been checked, but there you go. So if things go wrong and you are in one of those countries, you need to ask the hospital or the doctor treating you to treat you under the reciprocal healthcare agreement with Australia and show them both your Australian passport or another passport that shows you're a permanent Australian resident, and also your Medicare card, of which it's digitalised now anyway. And we will put a link to the details in the show notes.
Next week, I'm chatting to travel writer, photographer and author Ronan O'Connell about his new book, Hidden in Plain Sight. It's a photographically book of the world's most popular landmarks, but the fascinating thing about it is it's showcasing all of the most intriguing, mystifying and jaw-dropping stories around them. And oh my gosh, Belle, there are some fascinating stories around these landmarks.
Cannot wait to hear that one. If you would love it, we would love it if you follow us on socials. You can find us at The World Awaits podcast on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And feel free to drop us a line at hello@theworldawaits.au. Or if you're enjoying this episode, please give us a rating or a review. That's a wrap for The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.